Prime Minister and I had a chance to sit down after he made a major announcement today in Canberra. It is a big move of the ball forward when it comes to drought. Now, there will be those that will be absolutely hating the idea of anything that the government does when it does to drought, that it's not going to be enough. However, also, people hate this format sometimes when I sit down with the Prime Minister, where, look, if you want UFC, go watch UFC. If you want to hear the Prime Minister explain his decisions, watch this. It must be frustrating that at the very same time as you were making the announcements about drought today, this report was also being released, and for much of the afternoon the media seemed way more focused on the report than the money for the drought. What does that tell you about the political climate?
Oh, it talks a bit about the bubble, I think. But for me, I mean, that's their problem. I mean, for me, what I was focused on and pleased to be getting some really good feedback from rural and regional communities today from the package we announced today. It's in response to listening to them very carefully about what they believe needed to be the next step in what we were doing. So, I had a footy coach once, and he always used to say that you can never complain about the field, right? If it's raining, if it's windy, if it's muddy, that's where you've got to play the game that day. And I have a very similar view about how you deal with the media. It is what it is, and you deal with it.
Very good point. All right. Well, yes. Let's talk about drought. But before we get into some of the specificity, I want to sort of deal with an elephant in the room here, which is there seems to be two different ways of interpreting the government's drought response. The people in the regions and the people who love the regions but don't live in them. And these seem to be the pockets of people who write some pretty ferocious emails about the government's response. What can you say to get these people to look twice at the efforts of the government? Because it feels like, as we've seen in previous governments, previous prime ministers, once a certain attitude starts to metastasise, it becomes a real problem.
Well, the policies we have to put in place, the support we have to put in place, actually has to make a difference and work in the communities they're designed to. That's how you should frame policy. That's where your focus should be, and that's where our focus has been, in those places. And in those places, they understand the challenges of the drought, and they also understand what the needs are, and they've been telling us about that, and we've been constantly responding to it. In metropolitan areas, in city areas, where it isn't a day-to-day issue, there's lots of opinions, and that's fair enough. That's every country where everybody can have one, and that's fine. But what my point is that our job is to demonstrate how these policies are actually making the difference in the places it needs to make the difference. So that's what we've done today. I mean, our plan, as I said to you when we got together last time, has three components: the direct assistance to the farmers and grazers' families and themselves and what they do there. And we look after the sort of income support side of that. The states look after what's going on the farm. Then there's the communities themselves, which are also deeply affected because of the loss of income from the agricultural sector. And we put big stimulus into those towns and communities. And thirdly, there's the longer term issues of the irrigation infrastructure or the water infrastructure and the silage facilities, all those sorts of things. So that's what we've been doing. And today, what we knew was there are so many farmers who know they will get to the other side of this drought. They know that on the other side of this drought there is a profitable, successful, viable business, as there has been for generations before. And as the drought has gone on, initially, there would be some farmers who were marginal before the drought, and you see that in droughts. But as it's gone on even longer, well, those who have had good farming practices, those who have made preparations, they're the ones who have got into greater difficulty as time has gone on. So the loan scheme that we announced today, which is the feedback we have had from the sector, zero interest loans means for 2 years they are able to get the capital they need to, whether it's to transfer their stock for agistment or pay for fodder or cart water or do up their dam infrastructure on their property or clean them out or whatever it is they're doing for their farming practices. They can do all that, keep the farm hands employed and all that sort of thing, because they know in 2 years' time they will be in a position to actually have the business service that loan.
But what happens if it doesn't rain in the next 2 years?
Well, in 2 years' time, if we're still in that situation, then we would look at those loan arrangements again. But our expectation in framing this is that, you know, within that 2 year period, we would hope, and certainly they would too, that they'd be harvesting in 2 years from now. That they would have been restocking by that period of time, and as a result of our trade agreements and other things, they'll be doing a lot better. The thing about this drought, which is a bit different, is that farm prices have held up very well. In fact, they've increased every year for the last 5 years, and the equity level that farmers have had in their places has been growing as well. So if those who've made the difficult decision to leave the land, they've been able to do it with a much better price, and that is factored in to their decision about, well, was this a good time to go, and how can they redeploy that capital and what they might want to do next in their lives. So the thing is that farming's a business. It's not a charity, and they don't like to be seen as a charity either. They are running viable businesses that employ people and have done so for generations. So you give loans to businesses.
And is that why you're charging them interest and not just giving it as a grant?
We're not charging them interest for 2 years, so and then it's a concessional rate of interest, and so the current concessional rate of interest on those that happened prior to now is 3.11%. There'd be a lot of businesses in metropolitan areas that, you know, when they go through difficulties, would love zero interest loans for 2 years and concessional rates at 3.11 for a small business. But, you know, we've had that conversation before about the strategic significance of the agricultural sector. But there is $700 million in direct grants that we've announced today. And that's the grants for the Roads to Recovery program. It's the grants of $1 million each for all these councils again. It's the grants for the Building Better Regions program. It's the direct cost of actually providing that zero interest for 2 years, and that of itself is in the vicinity of over $70 million. And then, of course, there's the water that we're going to buy from South Australia to flow along the Murray, which is going to re-energise that whole district as they grow fodder, both to support themselves and the activity there, and provide more fodder up into the drought-affected areas.
So that deal that you've been able to do with South Australia, you pay market rate, mates rates, how does this work?
We pay the marginal cost of running the desal plant, and we anticipate that will be around about 80 odd million for 100 gigs, and through the swapping arrangements, that means we can release water over the next 6 months down through the system out of the Murray, and that will provide, and that will be allocated through a tender process at deeply discounted. They're not going to pay market rates. I mean, the market rate for water is about 1,000 a megalitre. This will be significantly discounted around about the cost of our production on those things, and probably a lot less than that. So that will mean that they'll get access to the water, they can get their planting going, their crops already, and they'll do that over 2 waves, I understand. Now, that activity along that area, which has seen water flow past their properties, I mean, I've seen those terrible images too. And this is why we thought this was an innovative way of addressing what is a particular problem along the Murray, which we all understand. That area itself is not in, you know, there's water there, but they can't access it because they can't afford it. So this is going to be a way of, I think, providing some direct, immediate support to those places. But at the same time, we're helping farmers so they can help other farmers. It's got quite a virtuous cycle to it.
All right, last question. Hopefully, again, we can get a chance in the next couple of weeks to present more questions from people, because I want them to hear from you in great detail. So, Prime Minister, thank you so much for your time.
Thanks a lot, Paul.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Good on you.